All right, thank you for coming. So this session is about touch your data, right? Sounds appealing? A little bit? Nice, okay. So let me introduce myself. My name is Claus Lavendt. I'm from Denmark. I run a company called Datamatics. I've been around since '94 and been presenting several times here, so maybe you've seen me before. I also do several free tools that I've put out in the community, and feel free to go explore that. All right, so let's align expectations. What's in it for you? This is meant to be an inspiration so that you can go home and use some of this inspiration to make your solutions better, more sexier, and nicer for your users. I will show real-world examples, and you will not get any demo files, but we will look into some code so that you can get an idea of what is really going on. The great thing here is that it's pretty simple. So simple. The code is pretty simple, so that's a good thing. Okay, sounds okay? Sure. So the agenda, why, what is it? Why are we doing it? How can we do it? And then let's dig into some real-world examples, right? So what this is about is using the web viewer and some other of the tools we have available for creative use, right? It's not about showing pie charts or any of the other cool features we can get with JavaScript libraries and so on. It's much more about looking into your solution and the uses of your solution and the users, and how you can make it better and easier for them to input data and work with data. So that's why the title is Touch Your Data, right? We're using web viewers, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SVG, and calculations. A lot of it is actually native FileMaker, and then there's some of the simple coding of HTML and so on. So I think most of you, even no matter what level of expertise you have, will see that, oh, there's actually something I can go right home and apply to my own solution, right? Because your app should be a joy. It should be a joy to use your app, right? So, so why should we really do this? Well, if we use some words to describe something, that could as well be in your app. How would that look like, right? So I'm going to try to keep up with this, right? So it's a thing. Sometimes you see it by itself, sometimes you see it with others, not always the same type. It's something you use every day. Most people, at least, use it every day. That is, most adults, at least. Some kids use it as well. It's on a wall when some are, some is in a box or in a box. Normally it's inside, at least when it's not outside. You have many of them in your home. Well, depending on the size of your home, it can be dangerous. In fact, it can kill you. But it's also something you need for making dinner. I would if I'm making anything with meat. Also for much vegetables. You often need it if you want to see something. You definitely need it when watching TV, mostly, unless you have a special TV. You would want to use it if you have long hair. That's after taking a shower. These days, it's expensive to use. Okay, you all know what I'm talking about, right? Right? No? Any guess? Not a single one.
A FileMaker solution.
It's a power outlet, of course. Right, power. Okay, so we could describe something in many words. That's, you know, if we just had a picture, it would be so much easier. The same thing could apply to your solution. Why only show spreadsheets, table views, form views, and so on, if you can do something where it's much easier visually to decode what's going on, right? Again, it should be a joy to use your app. If it's easy to use your app, the data quality will increase. And data quality is everything in any kind of app, right? And then bear in mind, not all people are data people. So we need to take that into consideration. And that really starts from looking at the users of the app and thinking about who are these people, what type of people are they, what are they doing, and what do they need your app to do, right? There are so many people who are not office people, and we build apps for them as well, right? So the first thing to do is to identify use cases, because not everything should be an image or something you can touch, right? There's uses for everything. So start by identifying use cases where in this situation, in this app, with these users or these types of users, and it doesn't have to be all the users of the app, but for specific users, there could be a benefit from doing some of the things that I'm gonna show here. Another key is to keep it simple. Keep it simple. That goes for almost anything in your life, right? Everything is so complicated already. So if we can do it simple, then let's by all means do that. And then I'm going to show you different methods to go with this. And sometimes one method is good, and in other situations, another one is. If you know that you have several options, then it's easier to determine which option should you take in this situation, right? And bear in mind, sometimes native FileMaker is just the best thing. You shouldn't forget about that. So the magic here with the web viewer is really using, for example, HTML and CSS, and the new step where, not the new step, the new JavaScript function that is embedded in the web viewer. FileMaker performs script with option, right? And then that's the way we can interact with the web viewer with a script and scripts. That's something we all know, right? And in many situations, the scripts is actually doing all the magic, all the calculation stuff, which means you don't have to do it in JavaScript. Sure, are you good at JavaScript? Then maybe it's better to do it in JavaScript than the web viewer. But these examples is much more about the magic happening in scripts, which we all know, right? Oh, sorry. There it is. Yeah. So I just have an example. The last line, even though it's a bit long, it's a div tag, which I am sure all of you have seen in HTML. And it's already built in. You don't need to write any more code other than saying, okay, and in this case, I don't even need to have an ID is this ID. But that's just as a script parameter. Then just on-click equals FileMaker perform script, and the name of the script and the options. That's the magic, right? Then you can turn any HTML code into something you can touch, you can click, right? That's it. And then the other magic lies in many cases inside FileMaker using while, substitute, and many other things. But while and substitute are really, really powerful tools to modelize with data, right? All right. You can still keep up? Not fallen asleep yet? Great. All right. So let's start simple. So the first example is pretty simple. It's a real-world example of a schedule that was too complex for FileMaker alone using a portal and conditional formatting. So we combined the power of FileMaker and the simplicity of HTML. Sorry, it's a work schedule for a venue that hosts events. At these events, there are several people who need to work there, and they have different functions. Some work in bars, and some work in like security, so that's all over. And then there needs to be, they also need to be able to change shifts. If they cannot work anyways, then another one needs to take the shift, and that has to be visually on that schedule. All right. So that's the first one. Just a second. Yes. And now we see it. Okay. This is basically just a ripped out file. Okay. So you see it all. Should I zoom a little bit, maybe? Okay. So we have a web viewer here. The web viewer is pretty simple. It's just showing some HTML. The HTML is created in FileMaker for each of the row. It has a color. The color is just a class, that's CSS, telling whether it should be a green block or a yellow block. And then inside there's just a time, right? So fairly simple, and it's not like this is gonna win a design award, but it's really easy to decode and it's very easy to look at. So now the thing is that it would be nice if we could click around. So for example, let's say Anna, she is assigned to work here at one of the bars, and I want her to work in the other bar. I'm just clicking at that square, which is a div tag. And by doing so, I'm calling a FileMaker script, and I'm just showing the dialog here, telling what parameter did I input in the script. Based on that, I can go and modify my FileMaker data and update the HTML code. So that's fairly simple. And if we are looking into the HTML here, there's some CSS here. It's just a single CSS. And just bear in mind, this can be optimized. It can be much different. But again, it's just about having some div classes here, about the rows and headers. And then we have a section. Oh, not here, right? Wait. It is here. Let me see. Yeah, the first one. We have a section here, and there's basically a div tag for every single of the blocks there. I give it an ID. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm lazy, so I can just have here in Perform FileMaker clip and say the script parameter is this.id. Then it just grabs the ID of the div tag. So I can copy and paste here. That's just for that reason. And then I have some classes here. And as you can see, there's a class here that says green. And because it says green, the color is green, right? Otherwise, the default is yellow. So that's it. And I just have an ID. What they mean is really not, it doesn't really matter, but it's generated by FileMaker. So when I input that as a script parameter, my script will know the logic behind in order to go and update the records that needs to be updated and update the HTML to reflect that. Okay, pretty simple. Complete silence, right? Yeah. And here is a row, in case you wanted to notice. All right. So that's a pretty simple use of this way. Actually, I could show you. This has been iterated. So now this is an iteration where we have put in some JavaScript code instead. And this is of course much more sexy, but it also involves some more coding as well. But as you can see, you can double click on the stuff here in order to move them around, do other stuff here. But that's just the evolvement of this one. So sometimes it's pretty nice to start with the basic stuff and then it can evolve over time, right? So that was the schedule stuff, right? So let's go back here. Another approach is to use SVG. Do you all know what SVG is?
Yes.
Yes, anyone who doesn't know? Oh, great. Awesome. The great thing about SVG is that it looks just like HTML. That is, it's the tags and so on. And this describes the object there. The power plug is described in those numbers. That is how it's described to make that drawing. But Fun thing here is that the SVG is wrapped in tags that looks exactly like HTML. And in fact, you can apply div tags. You can put it into a div and then you can click on it, right? And do so much more. So let's dig into another real world example. I used to make the DevCon to Go app for people who have been to the DevCons before. So maybe you have it, it's completely open and you can steal all the codes. That's actually one of the purposes. I don't know if you can grab a copy now, if FileMaker has it anywhere. Otherwise, you can ask Rosemary if you're interested. But one of the essential things is to navigate the conference, right? And this year it's really, really easy to navigate the conference, right? So that's why we don't need the app. In the past, we needed that app and to have some maps. And the idea was to take it's actually an image of the map of the floors and the rooms, and then apply a mark or a highlight on which room you should go to. And this is done with SVG and the web viewer, right? And the magic here lies in as you can see, this looks very much like HTML, right? And this one is even not using the perform FileMaker script. This was before we had that, so that was using the FMP protocol. But again, it's just display none, so it's hidden, but you can still click on it, on-click, window location, blah, 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 and do something. And then a FileMaker script will take care of modifying the data and records and update the HTML. Okay, we want to look at it? Yes. Yeah. That's great, because I anticipated that. Or fingers was crossed that you would do that. Say that. All right, so here's the app. So there's two ways of going from this app. So let's say we would like to see Steve Winter's session here, and that's in Texas C, because that makes sense to everyone. So we can click on view on a map, and here it is, right? So another approach is to go to the maps and see, here's the conference layout, and say, I would like to go to, let's say, Texas Ballroom D. And clicking on that one, I'm going to find a list of all the sessions that will take place in Texas D, right? So it's a nice way of touching, saying, oh, I'm by this location. Let me see what's going on now. Should I stay or should I go, right? Again here, I have just grabbed out the SVG of, here it is, Texas. So, and this is actually much more interesting, I think. Let me see if I can zoom here. Let me do this. Oh, a bit too much, sorry. Like that. Yeah, well, I know we are some old people here who needs it big. I said we. All right, so in SVG we have a tag called G for, I don't know, some people know better, I just know it works. ID, again here, ID is B, and display on click to call this script with a parameter of 134 and show. And then I'm modifying the classes here. So class 1 is, okay, maybe I should go back to the map here, just so we can see what I am talking about, right? So looking here, you can see there is a blue frame around here. That's class 1. Then there is a white semi-transparent area. That's class 2. And if there is a red box on top, then it's class 3. So basically what I'm doing is I'm changing the classes. And since this is a rectangle, you only need to say how many by how many That's the size of it. It's SVG. But SVG only needs those two. And then we need to a width and a height, right? And then where should it be X versus Y? And it's just a matter of typing in, and then you can modify. Oh, sorry, not now. And then you can type in and modify and update and see when. That's actually how I did these maps in order to find the right positioning, right? But then it's super simple because it's only a matter of a few lines, and then we have a square with a white, with a rectangle, and a letter for this one, because in this case it was a letter, right? And then the only thing I'm doing is just adding a class 3 on, I think it's class 3. Yeah, it is. That's class 3. And this is simple CSS. Actually, there's a lot of CSS that is supported by SVG. Not everything, but simple stuff like coloring and so on is stroke and fill and so on. Super simple, right? Okay. Actually, we could see if that's interesting. I'm clicking in here and calling a FileMaker script, setting a variable. Oh, let me just step in here. Oh yeah, the only thing going on here is actually I'm navigating to another layout, right? And let me see. Did we do? We didn't do anything other than that. Yeah, show all records, but I have, what is it? Sort. Sorry. It has been some time since I did this. Okay, now we are at the right place, and we have a script parameter of 136, which is the room number. So I'm just going to find session records with a room number of 136. And that's it. And then now we're showing a list, sorted, exit, right? Feels like magic, but really not much to it. Okay. So that is SVG. Let me see. Yeah, I actually have another example here from the real world. This is a solution that runs on an iPad. So these people who are using them are factory workers. Actually, they are more like storage workers. That's even a name, where, you know, they put boxes on shelf and move around with forklifts and so on. The thing is that in a storage house or in a warehouse, there's systems in place. They like systems, of course. So they have some shelves in a room, in a building. They have shelves, rows of shelves, and different heights, and on each shelf it has room for X amount of pallets or whatever it is, right? So there's a system. It's very simple. All those factory workers know that system, but they work in a factory operating forklifts because they're not office people, right? So let's find a nice way of telling, okay, this unit. And you don't have to worry about this or what does it really mean. But basically, they are scanning a barcode on the pallet that identify what it is. And it is in Danish. But the idea is that I have a pallet here. I need to move it from one location to another location, right? So everything is a location inside a warehouse. So they scan the barcode saying, yeah, sure. And then I need to put it somewhere else, where I need to put it into the blue building. And here is a representation of all the shelf rows in that building, right? So we have from A to N, and then there's up to 25 spaces. So let's say I want to put it into D4, and when I see D4, now we are changing the dimension to see shelf 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? On top. And I could say I want to put it on the top here. On 5, 4, yes, I would like to move it. And now it's moved. And then there's a FileMaker script who is updating the records, who is updating the representation of this storage facility and change the color. If there's something there, it will turn orange. If everything is filled, then it's red. Okay, all the spaces. But this is a much nicer visual representation, even though it's not going to win a design award. But that's not the purpose here. The purpose is to show something that people who is working with this can identify. They can touch the data here, right? Let me see. I want to show you the. Okay, maybe I can show the script that is generating this. Because actually what we're doing here is that we are generating this map dynamically. So each building has two maps, like at least two maps, several. A map of the entire floor, and then when you go into a row, then you have the other dimension map. And since it's all squares, you saw on the other file that it's just two numbers, right, or four numbers, because you need the placement as well. Since it's numbers, we can calculate that. So we can calculate depending on how many rows should there be, how many shelves should there be, how high should it be as well. It's all calculation. It's just FileMaker calculation. And we're just taking this object and just moving it around by updating the numbers, right? So it's a matter of determining when you set out to build stuff like this is how big is it? If it's 2 by 4, then the next one the first one starts at 0 position, then the next one should start at 4th position 4 and 8 and so on, right? It's just mathematics. So easy and something that can be calculated, right? And what goes on here is, well, if I can show that, maybe it's not even interesting. But as I say, the magic lies in this is just a let statement. And what I'm doing here is basically determine what is the ID of the square that I'm working with, find in the HTML, and then replace the class in order to have it. And this is not even a class. This is just a name of the color. Orange, green, red, white. So it's pretty simple. It's just substitute here, right? In order to update. And if we are gonna generate a row, well, this is generating, okay. So this is when you want to generate a full factory floor. The calculation that is responsible for doing that is this one, right? I don't know how many lines it is, but it's just a while, just, right? I know. Christian, no? Some reason, zoom? For some reason I cannot zoom here. But as you can see, I have a size here of 35 by 45. It's just a number, you know, play out with it and see what works. Then I'm looking into some records. Actually, the records is created beforehand with all the location spots, with the location codes. And then I'm going to look into all the related records and in a sorted order. And then I'm building up the map, the HTML map, using a while. And then I have some objects here, like the G objects here. That's the header. And here's the block. And as you can see, there's just some placeholders that is the X, the Y, the ID, and so on that we replace, right? So it's fairly simple. And this calculation is building the entire map. Super simple, right? Okay, are you with me so far? Still not bored? So, let's get back. All right. So, the last case I want to touch on is a case where we had a factory that built windmill towers, right? And windmill towers is extremely complicated if you didn't know. You take a big steel plate and then you fold it and weld it together. And the biggest one will be about 7 meters in diameter. I don't know what that is in feet, like 40 feet or something. 21. 21. Exactly. Okay, but it's a big one, right? And there's so many regulations in place and so many certifications and stuff that is that needs to be complied with. The welding, the angle of the welding cannot divert more than 1 degree on such a big object, which is ridiculous. So these people who's welders, who's doing all the hard work, welding this together, and it takes a lot of time to do that, and folding and everything. They are not office people. That's why they chose to get a job as a craftsman, right? But now we need to document everything. They need to document all the weldings and so on, which actually makes sense when you think about it. When you have collected a full windmill and put it out in the North Sea or in the Pacific or wherever you are putting it, it's not something you take down because there was an error, right? So they really need to be sure that everything is well done and documented, not the least, right? So how do we make something that is appealing to a welder, right? Something they can touch. So basically, there's checklists and there's a lot of processes going on, and they need to identify those processes and follow a checklist. So this was the mock-up. So basically, a section of a windmill tower consists of several wraps. I think it's called. Anyway, you wrap it, and then you weld them together, and like 9 or 10 or 14 of those consist of a section, right? But for each of these wraps, there's a bunch of processes going on. So in order to illustrate that, the first one is we receive this plate, and then we need to fold it and do other stuff, and that is shown on the drawing here. So it actually serves 2 purposes. One, it's easy for the welders to go in on the iPad and say, I'm working on this process, touch it, and then get to the checklist and follow that checklist, and then he's done, right? The other purpose is that this can be on the on a big display for the factory manager, saying, okay, what's the progress? Because they are working 24/7. When you have an operation like that, you need to keep on 24/7. And it's nice to know where are they, these things. And then if something is red, it means that an error has occurred. Something was wrong, something was broken. So we need to pay attention to that and make sure that that got repaired after all their guidelines and everything that's in place for such a repair, right? But this serves 2 purposes, okay? And the first one is on the iPad where, pretty simple, but you can go in and you can touch it, right? So that was the mock-up. Would you like to see how that turned out in real life?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so let me find it here. Okay, so looks a little bit different, but you can recognize it, right? So what we actually did here was, and I'm sorry, there's only a couple of them that has a color. And you need to go through a full checklist before it turns green or orange or red. So I didn't have the patience to do so, all of them. But the nice thing here is that there's actually only 2 objects. As you can see, there's the object there's the wrap itself, right? So the wrap itself is this part, the big part, and then we have something in the middle here, which is kind of the processes when they stitch together those wraps, right? And they all have a meaning. They have some codes that make sense for them, CW1, T2, and so on. Doesn't make any sense to us, but that doesn't matter as long as it makes sense to the people who needs to work on them, right? So the idea is that this is dynamic. We have two objects. That's actually not completely true, but more or less two objects. Because in some cases, as you can see, for this wrap, there is four main processes going on. But we have others where we can have up to 10, which is basically just some SVG that is stitched together. Because it's SVG, we can repeat it, meaning that we can accommodate any size of tower that is needed in this drawing, because it's just SVG, and then we just repeat it and say, okay, how big is that? That is so many points or pixels or whatever it is, and then we just add them to each other, and then we have a refactor going on, and then it's just a calculation, right? So that's the mechanics. So let's say we are going to do this process. Okay, we click on it, and here is something cutting the screen. Oh, yeah, and they are really guided saying you cannot approve this one before you have actually spent some time on it, right? Many of these processes takes hours and hours, so that's why there's a timer, also for documentation. I mean, just welding a wrap together, I think that's about 2 or 3 hours, right? And doing stitching 2 wraps together, that can take 8 to 10 hours to do so, right? So it's not something you do in 5 minutes, right? So I'm just gonna, yes, I approve this, and bear in mind this is on an iPad. So now everything turned green. I did the 2 items on the checklist, and it turned green here. And when I go back, oh man, it's already green, right? So it reflects that. This is all done by FileMaker. It's performed script on server to do the heavy lifting of looking into the records, and then do the update that reflect that on the drawing. But the only thing that is going on is substitute where, of course, it's a bigger SVG, but replace white with orange in this part. It's basic FileMaker stuff. Okay. All right. Simple enough. Yeah. So just, there's several stuff going on with the in-between processes as well. So it's really complicated. That's why I said keep it simple, because life is complicated enough already, right? So the more simple we can do it, our part will be better since it's already complicated. All right. And you're still hanging on since you're tired. All right. So let's recap. The idea here is to visualize your solutions, make them more interesting and appealing. And this is basic stuff. It can be very basic. Help your users to enjoy your app. And if users are happy, you get better data quality input, which is key for any solution. And simple code can really make a difference. So with that said, any questions? And there are no microphones, so. Hey, all local. Speak brother, listening. No question? Yeah.
With the HTML, the SVG, and so forth, I mean, that requires some semblance of knowledge of those techniques and everything. I mean, I'm thinking you could leverage maybe some of the AI stuff going on now to help you, if you could input what you want. And have you experimented with that at all, or?
No, have not. I don't see AI being any good in that direction.
Okay.
Maybe it's good for new people. Sorry, but I mean, AI really has its place in other areas, in my opinion. But to write the code, well, the HTML in this piece is where this is really basic stuff. The HTML and so on. Sure, you can make it more complex and so on, like the schedule that was really simple at start, and then now
Right.
it has some more code to it. But you can get help to that if you need it. In my experience, while trying to build this, I come up with ideas. I see something that I didn't see before. In my opinion, if you just tell an AI to do the stuff, you're skipping that process of thinking, or a big part of that thinking and experiencing. And oh, man, I need to adjust, right? So that's my experience and my thinking of it, right? Okay.
Do you consider a progress bar that's counting, 10 or 20,000 records during an import process using JSON or some other very slow process? Would you consider that to be data visualization?
Well, it is because it's giving feedback to the user, right? It's a different kind of visualization, in my opinion, because the user cannot, well, you can touch it, but nothing happens because the reason for the progress bar is because your computer is occupied with other tasks, right? So, yeah, sure, but really, yeah.
My users access my solution through WebDirect. Does
Yes.
the web viewer and WebDirect, are they compatible?
Sure, they are. Of course, there can be some differences, as with all web browsing technology. There's, it's working fine in Google Chrome, but not in Safari and then Edge. There's some differences. So some of this, most of this stuff will work right out of the box because it's so simple. HTML and CSS and SVG that works pretty much everywhere. So yeah, sure. We can do
Something to know with the web viewer, if you're going to display a web viewer in WebDirect, I believe there's a different type of utility. Like, if you're going to throw out Pro, you can show the raw HTML with the data as HTML tag. But if you're going to do it in WebDirect, it's like, if you're on Pro, show this one. If you're on WebDirect, you have to do like basics before encoding. There's a
Sure.
community
Yeah.
and that's really helpful.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah.
You have a tool that you would recommend, like for instance, generating the SVG. Is there, I know Acrobat will generate an SVG, but is it in that HTML-like format or?
Yeah. SVG is SVG.
Yeah.
Pretty simple, more or less, right? Illustrator can do that. There's several other graphic tools that can convert into SVG. I've also seen other programs that say save as SVG, which just takes an image and base64 encode it and wrap it into SVG, which is not really SVG, right? So open that, but it's just a text file you can open and manipulate, which is the beauty of SVG, and it scales on any screen. So nice. So yeah, but no, I don't have any tools. Normally, if it's outside of this complex stuff, I go to a web designer, or we have a designer on the team, or I'm using Jan or one of the other people who are good with graphics. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge that we actually lifted your code from GridCon 18
Awesome.
and used it in our solution.
Great. Stole everything you could. Yeah, I'm happy to hear. Right. So, nothing else. I would say thank you very much for attending.